Judge Miller had just purchased his dream home, a quiet house, with a beautiful garden he planned to fill with rare orchids. It was his sanctuary, his escape from the demanding world of the courtroom, but his peace was the moment he moved in. He met Carol, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood and president of the Homeowners Association. Carol lived next door and seemed to have an opinion on everything, from the color of his mailbox to the length of his grass. Miller, a patient man by nature, tried to be neighborly. He smiled, waved, and complied with the endless stream of notices she left on his door. But Carol's requests became increasingly bizarre. She insisted his award-winning roses were too vibrant and clashed with the neighborhood's subdued aesthetic. She complained that his windchimes, a gift from his late wife, were a public nuisance. Miller politely explained that his property complied with all HOA bylaws, but Carol wouldn't listen. The real trouble started with the century-old oak tree that stood proudly on the property line between their two houses. Miller cherished the tree. Its sprawling branches provided shade and a home for countless birds. Carol, however, saw it as a menace. She claimed its leaves clogged her gutters, and its roots were threatening her foundation. She demanded he cut it down. Miller refused, offering to hire a professional arborist to trim the branches on her side and even pay for gutter guards. Carol scoffed at his offer. "That tree is an eyesore, and it's coming down one way or another," she sneered. A few days later, Miller came home to a horrifying sight. The magnificent oak tree had been savagely hacked. Huge branches lay scattered across his lawn, and deep, deliberate cuts marred its trunk, exposing the raw wood. It was a clear attempt to kill the tree. His heart sank. He looked over at Carol's house. She was standing on her porch, a smug grin on her face, holding a small handsaw. There was no doubt who was responsible. Miller called the police and an arborist. The arborist confirmed the damage was intentional and severe, likely fatal for the tree. The police documented the scene, but without a direct confession or witness to the act itself. They said it would be a difficult case. Miller knew he had to take matters into his own hands through the proper legal channels. He gathered evidence, photos of the damage, the arborist's report, and a log of Carol's previous threats. He filed a civil lawsuit against her for property damage, seeking compensation for the value of the tree and the cost of its removal. Weeks turned into months. The lawsuit slowly made its way through the system. Meanwhile, Carol became even more hostile. She'd glare at him from her window and make loud, snide comments whenever he was in his yard. Miller remained calm, trusting the legal process he had dedicated his life to. He knew his day in court would come. Finally, the hearing date arrived. Miller took a personal day from his own judicial duties and walked into the county courthouse, not as a judge, but as a plaintiff. He sat quietly in the gallery, waiting for his case to be called. A few minutes later, Carol strutted in, dressed impeccably, her lawyer by her side. She looked around the courtroom with an air of confidence, as if she owned the place. She didn't even glance in Miller's direction. The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. "All rise. The court of the Honorable Judge Miller is now in session." The room fell silent as the side door opened. Everyone stood. Miller, however, didn't move from his seat in the gallery. He simply watched from the side door. A different judge, Judge Davis, walked in and took the bench. He was an old colleague of Miller's. Carol's lawyer, recognizing the name on the docket, had assumed Judge Miller would have to recuse himself, but he hadn't anticipated this. Judge Davis began. "We are here today to hear the case of Miller versus Carol regarding a property dispute. Mr. Miller, please approach." Miller stood up from the gallery and walked to the plaintiff's table. As he passed Carol, he saw the color drain from her face. Her confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure shock and dawning horror. Her eyes darted from Miller to the nameplate on the bench, then back to Miller. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The quiet man next door, the man whose tree she had destroyed, was a judge in this very courthouse. Carol began to fidget, whispering frantically to her lawyer. Her lawyer looked just as stunned. He had clearly not done his homework on the plaintiff. The proceedings began, and the evidence was overwhelming. The photos, the arborist's testimony, and the record of her harassment painted a clear picture. Carol's defense crumbled. She tried to claim the tree was a hazard, but the arborist's report proved it was perfectly healthy before the attack. When it was Miller's turn to speak, he didn't raise his voice. He simply and clearly recounted the events, his voice steady and professional. He spoke not just of the financial loss, but of the loss of a beautiful living thing that had stood for 100 years. He spoke of the principle of respecting a neighbor's property and the peace he had sought but never found. Judge Davis listened intently. After all the evidence was presented, he looked directly at Carol. His expression was stern. "Ma'am," he said, "the evidence presented here today is undeniable. You took it upon yourself to willfully and maliciously destroy your neighbor's property. Your arrogance and complete disregard for the law and for common decency are appalling." He continued, "You seem to believe you are above the rules that govern the rest of us. Perhaps you thought your position as HOA President gave you some special authority. It does not. In this room, you are not a president. You are a defendant who has been found responsible for her actions." The judgment was swift and severe. Carol was ordered to pay the full value of the mature oak tree, which was assessed at a staggering $50,000. She was also ordered to pay for the cost of removing the dead tree and grinding the stump, another $5,000. On top of that, she had to cover all of Miller's legal fees. The final amount was a devastating blow. Carol sat there, utterly defeated. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by the pale, grim reality of the consequences. She had picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. She had let her ego and entitlement lead her to break the law, and now, in a courtroom, the law had answered back. As Miller left the courthouse, he didn't feel triumph, only a quiet sense of justice restored. He had lost his beautiful tree, but he had affirmed the principle he lived by, that no one is above the law. The next weekend, he began planting new saplings in his garden, starting fresh, ready to restore the peace to his little sanctuary and the neighborhood. It was suddenly a lot quieter. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next video.